Welcome everybody to the GCLS Online Book Club. Today's book club is extra special. Not only do we have GCLS trailblazer and bestselling author Barbara Wilson and her book, Not the Real Jupiter, a Cassandra Riley mystery, but we have Karen Callmaker with us to co-host. But first, let me let this person in. But first, let me talk about our sponsor. The Lesbian Review, also known as TLR, is a website focused on reviewing lesbian fiction, lesbian movies, and lesbian music. In their words, we review only what we enjoy. That way we promote the best products and help lesbian and queer women find their next read, listen, or watch. Primarily focused on books, as of January 2021, the TLR has reviewed just over 1,500 lesbian novels. You can find them at thelesbianreview.com, where there are links to their social media and a place to sign up for their awesome newsletter. Following TLR is an easy way to boost your reading list with only the most brilliant lesbian books. So please give them a look and find your next read. We're going to start the book club officially here in a second, but of course there's always some housekeeping items. We're starting everyone off with you on mute. That will just help minimize unintended noise. We hope that you feel free to interact with Barbara. One of our goals for the GCLS Online Book Club is to promote fabulous authors and their works, but also to continue to build our GCLS community. Thank you all for being members. To ask a question, please type your question in the chat. If you do that, please make sure your question is to everyone, not just to the author or someone else on here. So I'll be able to queue up the questions and avoid redundant ones. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see everybody. And pass it off to you, Karen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome on a Saturday. And it's morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are. Barbara, KC, and I are all on the West Coast, so we're bright and chipper and well caffeinated. Our book today, I was so excited when I found out this book was on the way because Cassandra Riley has been silent for so long. But let me introduce Barbara Wilson, who's joining us from near the water in Washington State. Barbara Wilson Schuholm created the first lesbian amateur sleuth. Now, a lot of us would have said, that's enough for a lifetime. I'll just stop there. But instead, Barbara did a lot of other things. She put multiple lifetimes into one. She co-founded Seal Press, which is now an imprint of Penguin Books. She's translated books. She created a movement for translating works by women into English. At one point, she was printing books in her garage, including a self-help guide for women escaping domestic violence. On top of creating Pam Nielsen, the original amateur lesbian sleuth, she created Cassandra Riley in Gaudy Afternoon, which became a movie. She's still translating books from Norwegian. I was going to ask about that, and lives, as I said, near the water in Washington State. In 2020, she was named a Golden Crown Literary Society Trailblazer, and we're going to be back in Cassandra Riley's life in Not the Real Jupiter. So welcome, Barbara. Did I do an accurate job of summing up multiple lifetimes into 120 words?
Yes, thank you. I feel tired listening to it. Of course, I'm so old now that, it was sort of spread out over a long period of time.
I hear you on that one. Let me just do a real quick summing up of Not the Real Jupiter. My intention is to keep a relatively spoiler-free space. I know there will be people who haven't read it, so let's avoid the giving away the who did it part as we discuss other parts of the book, and maybe at the time we'll have a chance to mute the people who don't want to find out who did it, and we can talk about the who did it if somebody wants to address that or bring that up. So Not the Real Jupiter, we return to Cassandra Riley. She's a lot older, maybe not a lot wiser. We'll find that out in the course of the book, but she spent her life hustling for contracts, which has a lot to do with the action in Not the Real Jupiter. She advocates for herself and her authors and her books, and that's why she has decided to take a meeting in a remote town in Oregon, just pop up from San Francisco to Oregon, which I found funny, that idea that anyone would just do that. It is a long drive in a single day. But it's for a meeting that never takes place, and hence the mystery. So, Barbara, I understand you were going to read for us a little piece.
Yes,
Oh,
I would
great.
love to. So thank you for that great introduction. Delighted to be here. Hello to everyone. This is from the opening of the book. It's slightly edited, so I don't go on too long. And it starts in Spanish. ¿Qué es? ¿Qué es esto? Esta maldita bola de lana, said Louisa Monteflores. A goddamn farting ball of yarn. What the bloody hell is she doing on the cover of my book? Louisa's eyes blazed behind her fashionable bifocals, and she ran a furious hand through long, wavy, dark hair, shot with white threads that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen her 4 years before. Louisa and I were sitting on the balcony of her 8th floor apartment in the Pocitos barrio of Montevideo, Uruguay. The view was of the seaside promenade, the stiff-leaved palms, the beach along the Rio de la Plata. The air smelled of salt water and dry grass. It was early April, a warm autumn afternoon in the Southern Hemisphere. On the table, among the remains of our lunch, were the copy-edited pages of my English translation of Louisa's new collection of fiction. We'd been going through the text when Louisa had turned on her laptop and opened an email from someone called Karen Morales, the marketing director of the small American press in Portland, Oregon, publishing her new collection. Louisa read aloud the note that Karen Morales had sent along with a catalog copy. Hey, Louisa, sorry for the short notice, but due to unforeseen circumstances, we're all a little bit behind here at the press. The catalog copy is due at the distributors very soon, so if you and Cassandra could take a quick look and approve, that would be great. Thanks so much, Karen. P.S. We made a last-minute change to the title after seeing the fantastic cover mock-up provided by our amazing designer. And here's the disgusting cover text, said Louisa, turning the laptop in my direction so I could appreciate the horror of the cover illustration. Louisa Monteflores, one of the lesser-known foremothers of Latin American speculative fiction, gives us a collection of radiant stories that surprise and enchant. The title story is a mysterious tale of maternal love and loss between Jupiter and 2 of her daughter moons, Io and Europa. The background was blue-black with galactic bursts of color. The ball of yarn, white, striped, and swirled with pale orange, was obviously meant to suggest the largest planet in our solar system, with 2 strands pulled out and wound into 2 little yarn balls, one orange, one white. The original title in Spanish was Júpiter y sus lunas, which I had changed to On Jupiter with Louisa's grudging agreement. We can't call your collection The Moons of Jupiter, I'd argued. That's Alice Munro's book. Ike? Well, for one thing, she won the Nobel Prize. So that gives her a monopoly on the title? In a word, yes. You know, Cassandra, my friend, that my Jupiter is not the outer space planet. It is a state of mind, coldness, attachment, loss. It's not the real Jupiter. Louisa and I had argued strenuously, but at the moment we were agreed. Unraveling Jupiter, the publisher's new title, was hideous, and so were the balls of yarn. And what does she mean here? That the title story is a mysterious tale of maternal loss and love between Jupiter and 2 of her daughter moons, Io and Europa. Is Karen Morales an idiot? Does she not understand metaphor? The story is about a human mother and her 2 human daughters. Cassandra, you told me this editor was clever, this Giselle Richard. You showed me the letter she wrote about how dazzling my writing was. Well, she did say that, I muttered, and she looks intellectual in her photograph on the website. We must change the title. I'm going to write this Karen Morales immediately. She must be Latina with that name. I'll write her in Spanish, and I won't spare her feelings. Please wait, don't do anything rash, I begged. having been the recipient of a few letters from Louisa that did not spare my feelings. No, I'm writing Karen Morales and I'm telling her what I think of her cursed cover and title. I will unravel her, see how she likes that. She made as if to start typing and then slammed down the lid of her laptop and stood up. She was short in height, but anger always made her larger. This is all your fault, Cassandra. Most things were when it came to Louisa. I'm leaving. I didn't bother to respond. I knew in a few minutes if I looked over the balcony railing, I'd see her dashing along the Rambla, a 58-year-old woman in a black and white dress and a short red cardigan, expensive shoes, no purse, keys clutched in her hand, dark hair streaming behind her. In an hour or two, she'd be back. All I had to do was return to the copy edits and wait. Instead, I drained the rest of my red wine and went into the guest room to take a siesta. Thank you.
And a good choice for her to rest, because she gets precious little throughout the rest of the book. She seems to be snatching sleep
right.
at every turn. People, please put your questions in the chat, and I thought we'd, since I have the mic, I would start with the question of my own. If you have a favorite quote, also please put one in the chat. One of mine was, her clothes were well tailored but severe, and they fit her compact body like armor. That's a sentence I wish I'd written. And another that it leads into my question, because it's been so long since we've seen Cassandra. She's been off the page for a while. She describes herself as butch in a world with 50 more nuanced definitions. What were some of the changes to the lesbian and queer community that took place in the gap since we last saw Cassandra that you found you had to weave into the story?
Well, Cassandra hasn't changed in some ways very much. I mean, she's always been very open-minded. She's a traveler. She's lived in a lot of Catholic countries in South America and Spain. So she's already sort of outside the loop in terms of what's acceptable. She's had a lot of relationships with straight women, bi women, and married women, whatever. She's never had a full-time partner. And she's kind of a love 'em and leave 'em gal. So in some ways, she's not the kind of lesbian feminist that, say, I was to some extent, who has lived mostly in the United States, though with extended stays in London and other places. But the things that I kind of struggled with probably more than her age or her sexuality often had to do with technology, because things have changed in terms of how you find out about people, how you interact with people. Of course, I had to give her a smartphone. I had to make her doing email, looking at people on the internet, Googling, all those kinds of things. Uber, when she's in Portland, she's sort of interacting with the microwave and Skype and all these things. So those weren't available really. There were cell phones certainly in 2000, the last time she made an appearance, and there was certainly email, but she doesn't have Facebook. I'm not having her doing Twitter, but she is texting. So I had to make sure to put all those things into her life and into the story without kind of getting bogged down by the level of online research that she could have done on people. I still want her turning up at houses, interviewing people, kind of coincidental meetings on the street, those kinds of things that are, traditional with detective fiction. So lots of things have changed. Some things are the same. She was always the same in my memory, and she just kind of sprang forth again.
Yeah, that's at the smartphones, the bane of every mystery writer's life at this point. You just, yeah. And so the dead battery is quite useful. And on a remote Oregon town, it makes sense that she would lose connectivity and such. You know, Jessica Fletcher never had to deal with the smartphone.
Right.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
what was it that brought you to Cassandra? Why did she just suddenly pop up and say, I have a story to tell?
Well, I had never forgotten about her, but I did take a very long detour into more translation, which led to scholarly work and publishing books about Scandinavia and my own travels and memoir, and even more academic work with university presses. And I think after I had finished a long book for the University of Minnesota Press with a lot of footnotes, seemed like about 500 footnotes. I don't think there were that many, but it felt like it in various languages. I really needed a mental break. And because I had never stopped thinking about Cassandra, and she was kind of my friend, you know, in some ways, she was my compañera. I would smile when I thought of her. I thought I want to just write a story about her. And I had recently started going to London a little bit more frequently to see some old friends of mine who I'd known from the kind of women in print movement there, who were involved in feminist publishing at Virago and Women's Press and Shiva. And so in the course of sort of spending more time with them, I was also, things were triggered for me. And then I was asked if I would contribute, or they wanted to use a story of mine in an anthology coming out in England with Cassandra that had been published a long time ago. So there were lots of things sort of pushing me in that direction. And once I got embarked, I had many ideas. I thought, oh, I'll write a collection of stories. But then eventually I settled on this one. I thought it'd be really interesting if she came back to the United States. I'd not set a mystery with Cassandra in her homeland. And so there's a chance for her to sort of look at, I didn't specifically talk about, you know, who and the politics, but it's kind of there in the background, and also just her take on America, you know, encountering Portland, encountering, you know, driving through California, Oregon, being on the coast. All those things are really fun and interesting to me.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, there at the coast of Oregon, I loved how Cassandra left the cosmopolitan San Francisco and slowly drifted into the fog that ends up making it so hard for her to tell what's happened when her meeting does not go the way she had hoped. And I thought that was all just beautifully realized because when you've been in an Oregon fog, you know that feeling of not having a sense of direction, and you hear the ocean and you hope it's coming from that direction as you walk toward the edge of that cliff. So it's an interesting landscape.
Right.
Casey, do you have any questions in the chat that we can let other people jump in?
Yes, we do. Let me scroll back up. There's quite a few actually. One came up about, at some point, talk about her work with editors and the book she wrote on the topic. So I don't know if we want to delve away from the actual book we're talking about and go ahead and talk about that and maybe come back to it. I don't know. What would you like to do, Barbara?
Do you mean at Seal Press, talk about the books that I edited?
Yes, it's from Catherine. What were you asking?
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, good. Hi, Barbara. What a pleasure to look at you. You're looking just great.
Thank you. So are you. Yeah.
Been a
Long time.
It's been a long time. I absolutely loved the book. It was so great to have you come back to us, especially into the mystery genre. You're such an incredible pioneer. Murder in the Collective was such a groundbreaker. Anyway, I was so impressed when I saw the textbook that you wrote for editors, because there is so little out there. I even mentioned it in my review of the book. And so I wondered if you would just talk a little bit about your work with editors and how that came about.
Sure. After I left Seal Press, which was quite a long time ago, after 18 years, I started it in 1976 with my friend Rachel De Silva. And I worked there for 18 years, and then I really needed more time for my writing. I had also sort of spun off our translation series into a small nonprofit press, Women in Translation. So in 2004, still kind of needing to have more income than I could generate through writing, as many of you know very well. You usually need something else. I was asked to teach a class at the University of Washington certificate program on developmental editing. And that was something I'd done a lot of, but I had never really formulated any ideas about it. Seal Press worked very closely with authors and tried to be very respectful. And, I had longstanding friendships with many authors. So in the course of writing that, or teaching that class and thinking about what the relationship was between authors and editors, some of my students wanted to continue on and get more practice. And so we developed something called the Author Editor Clinic. And the book kind of came out of years of teaching the Author Editor Clinic and interacting with the students, as well as these books that we chose that we would work on as manuscripts. So I taught them how to become editors who were the kind of editors that I like to have, but also that I had tried to be one of those editors when I was in publishing, which is to give feedback that's very useful, not just opinion like love this, hate this, but actually how you can think structurally about your work and how you can improve it. And so I did then publish this little book, the Editor's Guide to Working with Authors, which also has things about boundaries and, keeping distance, but also being sympathetic about their career goals, helping them be realistic too. So yeah, it's been a good project. It's kind of wound down now, but it was really interesting to me as an author. I think it made me a better writer, actually, to do so much editing and think about editing. I'm sure you found that too. Yeah.
It's a wonderful book. Wonderful book.
Wonderful
contribution.
So there's another one jumping back to the story about the Sylvia Beach Hotel, which is a real hotel, actually. I know that. I actually thought about trying to stay there after I started reading the book, but of course it's summertime, so no luck. But have you ever actually stayed in the Edgar Allan Poe room? That's the question.
Yes, I have. I had been probably to the Sylvia Beach soon after it opened. Some friends in Portland told me about it. So I think this was in the 80s. And it's been going a long time. It's owned by a woman, and it's right on the cliff there. And all of the rooms are, as described in the book, sort of thematic, and a few have changed. I think my friend and I stayed in the Sigrid Undset room, which I don't think is there anymore. But I also stayed in the Edgar Allan Poe room, and I've been in the Melville room. And my wife and I had been there a couple of years ago, and I think we were in the Melville room actually with all the whale paraphernalia. But I had thought this would be a great place to set a mystery. And for one thing, they don't have Wi-Fi there. They continue in a very old-fashioned way. So you can use your cell phone, or you can go to a cafe nearby and use Wi-Fi. But the hotel itself doesn't have Wi-Fi, and they don't have televisions, and they kind of encourage you to check out from all that. So as a mystery writer, that's quite handy, because for a while, Cassandra can't get Wi-Fi. And so she's sort of not knowing what's going on for a day or two.
And literally everyone she tells that to is incredulous. What do you mean you don't have Wi-Fi?
Right. Yeah. These days, that's very rare. Used to be able to use it as an excuse, when it first came on. Oh, I'm not checking my email right now because my Wi-Fi is down or I'm someplace where we don't get it. Nobody
I'll,
accepts that now.
I'll use up my minutes. Yeah, that doesn't fly.
Yeah. The only thing you can say anymore when you don't answer is, I'm sorry, I was in a coma, for a week. I hit my head, I was washing the windows and fell over. So sorry, haven't responded. I've been unconscious.
Yeah. It does feel like that's the world we live in. I swiped the wrong direction, but nobody believes you.
Yeah. Karen, did you have another one, or do you want me to take another one from the chat?
Well, just kind of to follow up on the question about editors, there is a lot of humor and painful truth about the life of a creative writer. And Cassandra is, as a translator, is very much like a writer in dealing with people's presumptions about books. And the conversation that she has with someone where she's saying, the book isn't science fiction. This is who we actually are. And here's what the book actually is. And what she gets back is, it's not science fiction, because if it were, that would be so cool. That would be so trendy. That would be perfect. And living in a world where every time you talk about your work or your friend's work, it's exactly what nobody wants. And it doesn't matter where you are and what the subjects are. You're always not quite what somebody wants. And I just resonated with that scene. I laughed because the other choice is to cry. And I think that you caught that really well, in having that empathy for both sides of the equation, the people who are trying to sell the books because they put all the risk into producing it, and the people who write the books. And sometimes there's a gulf in between those two.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure there's a question there, but actually there is how much of your life experience ends up in Cassandra's story?
Well, Cassandra and I are different in many ways, but certainly I have had a lot of wild publishing experiences, both as a writer and as a publisher and editor. And I've heard many more from friends. And they often have to do with someone trying to put you in a box and label you in a certain way and compare you. There's, as you know, there's a lot of comparing that goes on in publishing. So they're always looking to say, it's kind of like 100 Years of Solitude, but it's also like Huckleberry Finn. They're searching to, she's the new Dorothy Allison, or she's the old Alison Duckbell, something like that. Searching for a better name to connect you with, and changing the titles. I mean, my own experience after I had left Seal, but was still publishing with them, is that this younger editor, who I like quite a bit, Ingrid, she thought that my book about traveling around the North Atlantic, a travel book about women in the sea, where I kind of stopped in various places and investigated the ways that women were remembered and their connection with the sea, both sort of mythological as well as sort of current day. I think I had called it Raising the Wind from some old myth. And because I had written about Grace O'Malley, this fantastic Irish woman pirate at great length, Ingrid said, let's call it the Pirate Queen, which was the name of one of the chapters. So I thought, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Probably get more readers that way. And the next thing I know, everyone's writing on Goodreads. I thought there would be a lot about women pirates in this book, and instead it's about, they're the fisher women. What's this about? Where are the pirates? So this kind of can backfire too. And so you see with Jupiter, there are these struggling publishers, including the marketing director, thinking, who's going to buy this book? But maybe if we call it something else, put a different cover on it, and say that it's speculative fiction. Oh, okay. Then people will buy it, and then they'll like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a lot of experience with marketing departments and changing titles, and sometimes that's a good thing. I mean, at Seal Press, we suggested different titles sometimes that really made the book pop on the shelves. And other times the author put their foot down very rightly and said, no, please do not go there.
Well, and we all know there's nothing happier than a reader who's been misled about the book that they're reading. They stay silent. They don't mention how unhappy they are, anything of that nature. Um,
Yes.
let's take another question out of the chat.
Okay, this is one after listening so closely to everything and such a prolific life that you've had, how do you keep track of all your ideas? The question is, do you have them on scraps of paper? How do you figure out which one to pursue next?
I do have a lot of scraps of paper, and I have various notebooks, and I forget about things and then I remember them again. Lots of ideas I've had sort of kick around with me forever. I don't forget them. I'm writing a new Cassandra novel now, a mystery, and it's set in Belgium, about these convents called béguinages, where lay women lived. And I remember reading about this in the 80s. I was completely fascinated by the idea of, they weren't real nuns, but they could kind of come and go. And it was in the medieval times in Flanders. And I was so interested that every time I was in Europe, I would try and visit some of these béguinages. And I thought it was such a great metaphor for women's space and the idea of, you know, independent women who made their own living, but the Pope wasn't involved. And anyway, I always thought I would write something about that. So finally, you know, decades later, I was like, oh yeah, the béguinages, Bruges. Before I die, I've got to write about this. So that's what I'm doing now. And, you know, I took notes on that. I had, you know, photographs. I had all kinds of weird junk that sometimes turns up, train tickets around Belgium. And so, yes, I think some ideas are extremely persistent and others just kind of come out of nowhere. You just think, oh, that's a good idea. I think I'll do that. Yeah, I don't know.
Nice. I love it. Okay.
You said one, Bruges is a beautiful place. So I'm on now. I'm just like, oh, I want.
Oh, thank you. That's good. Yeah, it is beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to tail after that one because I also found this to be true when I was reading the book, because I live in a lot of the areas you were describing around Portland and the beach and the coast and stuff. How do you capture the landscape, the physical landscape so vividly and with so much, so alive? I mean, it's really well done. How do you capture that?
I love to travel and I've always been an observer. I like to sketch and do watercolors. I take photographs sometimes, but mostly I just like to be in places. And I've always liked that ever since I was a kid. I was one of those kids who always wanted to be somewhere else, and certainly went to Europe pretty early on. So yeah, Oregon is someplace I love. My wife is in the Forest Service and she used to work in the Siskiyou down south in Oregon, around Coos Bay in that area. So we often have been there, but I always, right from the beginning of living in Seattle, I would go to Portland and see friends there. So had a real sense of it over the years. And of course, I'm setting this in some sort of pre-COVID time, you know, let's say 2018 or something like that. So that it is as I remember. I mean, it's not sort of, the downtown is not boarded up and, you know, the fires are not devastating the entire state. So it's a little bit mythological, but it's very vivid in my mind. And I would have to say that one handy thing about the internet is Google Maps. If you've been to some place and then you need to remind yourself, where is Laurelhurst, or where is Mount Tabor? How long does it take to get from Oakland to Newport? You can just look it up. I mean, in the old days, I had to write to people, I had to visit those places several times. I went to Venice like 3 times, actually, at various times, trying to gather information and collect maps and things like that for my book, The Case of the Orphan Bassoonist. But now I can just go to Google Maps and go to Street View and sort of walk down these streets. It's very wonderful. And if you've been there, then you combine that with what you remember about the place, the smells, the feeling, the all of that. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic.
I love Google Map too. It's everything but the smell, practically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and Karen, you've set some of your books in other places too, England for sure. And yeah, I mean, do you go and visit those places or rely on memory plus Google Maps and other info?
Well, it's a mix. If travel inspires ideas. So often you visit a place and you think, I could set a book here. It would be really interesting to do that. It doesn't always stick, but I've done that a lot. But I've also set books in places I haven't visited, and I rely. Another great source after Google Maps is travel bloggers, people who have videos of their experiences. And one of the most vivid was somebody standing on the porch of a house, actually videoing and talking as monsoon came and the wall of water that was coming toward them. It was so striking and so vivid that I thought I could actually write about that because the sound of the monsoon was there as well. So travel bloggers are incredibly generous with their experiences. So I rely on that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've had that too. That's really great. Or in Europe, you can look at these old Rick Steves videos. I was looking of some about Bruges, and he's, walking down the street with his knapsack, and you see the cobblestones, you see the cafe. Now I'm having some French fries, some frites, and some beer. So all these kind of odd things you find on the internet are part of the kind of just for the mill as a writer. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
Well, and those are great as well because he interviews local shopkeepers and sometimes other people who are live locally, and you get to hear the cadence of their voices and the timbre of the language that is probably their native language, and yet they're speaking English. So it's incredibly rich to watch those. Not to mention just fun. It's like it's practically porn at some point watching travel videos. Especially
or it's
in the last year.
Yeah, I'm working. Sorry, don't bother me. I'm watching Rick Steves
go away.
Background. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so here's another one out of the chat. This is interesting. Have you ever considered co-writing a crossover mystery with any other lesbic authors? And maybe Kate, I'm going to show my inexperience in lesfic. I've only been doing this for 3 years. Kate Delafield and Cassandra Riley need to team up.
I am there for that. So I think Cassandra and Catherine and Kate Delafield, they would probably kill each other that first meeting, because I can't think of two people with completely different styles.
They are a little bit different. Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe when Cassandra's next in the United States, she'll look her up. Is she still in LA?
She is. Well, she's in the high desert at the moment. But anyway, she's, I don't know if you're keeping up with what's going on down here in the high desert, which is where I am. But I think she's probably overdue for a trip to the Oregon coast. So maybe they could meet up there, Barbara.
Yeah, to get away from the smoke. Yeah.
It would be interesting. Certainly their generational equivalents, and who knows? Yeah. Anyway, you have a few things to do. I have a few things to do yet. So who knows? Yeah.
One thing I'm kind of curious about, since I've gotten so interested in this idea of the aging detective, is how do you age your detectives? And I know plenty of mystery writers don't do that. Like Sarah Paretsky, VI, is still sort of in her 40s somewhere. And that I find actually rather disconcerting, because I think, what happens to the memories that this person had? They're just sort of disappeared. You don't really see the moment in which she started using a smartphone, or in which she started doing her research on the internet. And the fact that she's still sort of having, she must be 80 by now, and she's still kind of flirting with men and climbing out of windows and things,
Right.
while at the same time still having her memories of who she was 40 years ago, which was still the same age, flirting with men and climbing out of windows and running down the street. I think that's actually kind of weird. To some extent, it's fine. There's a sort of suspension of or belief, really, that, oh, this character is always the same age, you know. And we like that they can still be physically active, but it's also kind of interesting to see what happens as they get older. How old can they get and still sort of do the job of being a detective?
I think that's a great observation. And I have to tell you that the best decision I ever made about Kate was to age her in real time. And just with, and the last book, which was High Desert, and the current one, you know, it's all about the issues of growing older, and a lot of things that are now meeting Kate at a crossroads where it's more like a massive accident. So many things are coming home to roost for Kate. You know, because you've got this perspective on your life and you see all of these paths that didn't get taken, all of the ones that you did take, and all the, so these last two books of hers have been very reflective. I think they've been a lot richer in the series. Michael Connelly also ages his character, his Harry Bosch character. I don't think that he's quite as rich a character as either one of our two, but you know, he's very different. It's you know, I mean, he's a very different sort of entity from what we write. But I agree with you. I think that it just brings so much more. And sorry about this long answer, Barbara. This is your hour, but you know, there's so much that we need to bring to just the books that you and I write, just in terms of keeping track of their life and all of the events. And now, what did she do when? And this current book, I repeated a scene from Nightwood Bar. Thank God I went back and read the book and caught that. But you know what I mean? It's a book that you've written like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I can't even imagine the challenges in writing a book where the character doesn't age, for all of the great reasons that you mentioned. Really, yeah, that you mentioned. Thank you. That was a great piece.
Well, my phone is blowing up from people saying, how do you not know who Kate was? I can't wait to see Twitter. So I apologize. They're going to get me later. They're going to get me later.
Millions don't.
On my TBR now. I get to it, I promise. Back to you, Karen. You have anything?
Actually, there's a question in the chat that it struck me during the book that after reading Karen Morales' eating this sushi, which was so appalling, that scene, it was just appalling. So in the chat, they ask, how long was it before you had a craving for sushi again?
Oh, not long. Maybe that's how I eat it myself, though I don't usually eat it with blueberry yogurt, but fortunately, if you've got a partner you're eating with, they're always saying, sorry, you've got some wasabi on your chin. And I think Cassandra doesn't feel like she knows Karen well enough to point out her poor eating habits. She just kind of looks in a fascinated way because Karen also has a very beautiful mouth. So,
which Cassandra did not fail to notice. And I like that.
She really appreciates women.
Yes, and that came through, this appreciation that was not skeezy or gamey. It was truly appreciative. This is a woman. She has a beautiful structure, a beautiful voice, and that it was truly appreciative of women. So I really like that, especially the different types of women. Do we have other questions from the chat?
Yeah, I'm going to jump back a little bit. This is from Catherine Force as well. What was your inspiration for your groundbreaking murder of the collective? How did the novel emerge? And any particular writers who led you to the mystery genre?
Oh, great questions. I had written my first lesbian novel, Ambitious Women, had some elements of a thriller in it. And so I've always been a big mystery reader ever since I was a kid. I think my dad gave me Agatha Christie once when I was sick in high school, and I read all of them. I had always seen potential in the mystery for talking about society. And I think that the genre just is an amazing way to discuss social class, women's lives, violence, social justice, as well as just have a lot of fun. And so I had, maybe in the back of my mind early on, I had been reading some women's mysteries. Amanda Cross, who was Carolyn Heilbrunn, who I knew in a different way as a feminist scholar and professor at Columbia in English, but she had written the Kate Bensler series, I think, as Amanda Cross. And so I'd seen those. I'd seen a couple of others. I mean, P.D. James was writing An Unsuitable Job for a Woman back in the late 70s. So I was aware. And then Sarah Paretsky, 82, Sue Grafton, 82. But I think probably my inspiration came from just being in collectives and working around people in collectives. Seal Press shared space with Workshop Printers, which was a printing collective, sort of a very motley crew, really. Rachel Da Silva, my friend, we did Seal Press together. She was also a printer, and I had taken printing classes at the Seattle Central College and learned to do parts of that too. So we started out Seal Press as printers. So I think that I had this idea, what if there were two collectives merging and they didn't like each other and people were against it? And also where we were in Seattle, there was a lot of sort of down in Pioneer Square, there had been a murder of a Filipino activist, and I got to know various Filipino women. And I thought, I'll just put that in there too, kind of international intrigue. And so I had a great time doing it. I don't know what I was thinking, actually, how it would be received, but people really liked it, sold really well, came out in England and also in Germany. And then people said, what else are you doing? What's the next one? I'm sure you're familiar with that. So you haven't even really been thinking about it. Then suddenly you think, oh, yes, now I'm working on one about juvenile prostitution, or I saw the potential for Pam to kind of investigate these social justice issues. So, and also as she became more of a lesbian, because in the opening book, she's sort of a lesbian. Her twin sister is straight. I was kind of interested in how that happens and how I could appeal to all kinds of readers in that. But she's definitively a lesbian by the end of Murder in the Collective. She has her big, coming out moment with Hadley. So yeah, I then was able to explore lesbian community and lesbian issues and a lot of kinds of things that were happening in Seattle at that time around pornography, S&M, all those kinds of issues that people were in arms about. Yeah. I think I hope that's a sufficient answer.
Awesome. So I do have another one, Karen, before we run out of time. This one came in through our awesome Facebook group, our book club, awesome. I'll say awesome one more time. Our book club group on Facebook. The person wanted to know, and I'm actually really interested too, what was it like to have one of your books made into a movie?
Oh, it's really interesting. I mean, I never thought it would happen. One day when I was at home, somebody got my number at the office, and this guy, James Myre, called me up and said, oh, I would love to get an option on Gaudi Afternoon. And I'm like, who are you?
Something
Anyway, he was a young gay man who had somehow read the book. He found it in the gay bookstore in Los Angeles. And he had big ideas. He was always saying to me, I think we should get Helen Mirren. I'm like, yeah. It was such an odd book to be made into a movie, I thought. But he persisted with it year after year. And meanwhile, I just got this option money. And then somehow or other, he actually did find someone to direct it, Susan Seidelman. And then they got Judy Davis involved, and then other people got involved. And then they found this Spanish company to make it. So I had not been involved with the script. They said, we don't want to make it that lesbian because, you know, we wanted to have a larger audience, and Susan wants to explore the larger issues of mothers and daughters. And because I thought it would never be made, it was sort of like, yeah, okay. I mean, what am I going to say? I say, yeah, she must be a lesbian because otherwise you can't make the movie. Again, I thought this is never going to happen. There were long years where nothing happened. And then suddenly they were kind of back on again with it. And so I did go and watch it being filmed. That was pretty wild, Barcelona. And I met Judy Davis, who was extremely grumpy, as you might expect. And Susan Seidelman said to me, oh, she and Marcia Gay Harden do not get along at all. But that's good because they shouldn't in the movie. Marcia Gay Harden was really sweet and friendly. But I still wasn't actually prepared for the experience of watching the movie, which I did first in New York at a screening, and then it was at the Seattle Film Festival. It was so kind of strange to see my ideas that had been in my head somehow out there somewhere else. And I didn't think the script was always that great. And I was then really sorry. Oh, Cassandra's not a lesbian and she's wearing this weird green coat half the time. Whereas in fact, Cassandra is always wearing her black leather bomber jacket and is definitely butch. So instead there's Judy Davis looking like Judy Davis wearing a big green coat and smoking all the time and saying, I need to quit smoking. And but it still was really interesting. And I like Marcia Gay Harden a lot. I liked some of the acting. I thought Juliette Lewis was really funny. And it was gay enough, I think. It was queer enough so that people perceived it like that. And I just saw it as another iteration of my original ideas. And it's not the same as the book. But it is actually kind of a fascinating movie. I sort of made my peace with it.
Well, you struck on the metaphor that I thought several times during the course of Not the Real Jupiter, that the core metaphor is that the planet Jupiter sends out these moons, and the Jupiter affects the moons, but the moons don't affect Jupiter. And sometimes for writers, that's our books. They go out into the world and that's it. It's not a two-way exchange of energy. And so if I have a last question, I did find that metaphor really fascinating. It flows through the whole book of the disconnect between the core of a situation and all of the fallout from it. In particular, you have Jupiter, or in the book, a disconnected mother and two daughters that have gone into their own orbits, so to speak. And they don't ever get a chance to confront Jupiter for the decisions that Jupiter made that put them in those orbits. And with the mysteries about justice, that felt like a conscious choice, like a withholding of one part of justice in order to pursue another. I don't know if you have anything to say to that about the metaphor and what you were going for.
No, that's interesting. That's very perceptive of you, I think. You know, there are different layers of these Cassandra books, and they can be read in different ways. They can be read as capers. They can be read as lots of wordplay. They can be read about translation. But almost all of them are about abandoned children in a way, and about mother-daughter relationships. And I think that is partly my own experience. My mother died. She became ill when I was 10. She died when I was 12. And so there's that kind of longing that I have for the mother who wasn't there. But I think it's played out in different ways, where I'm sometimes explicitly writing about orphans, and sometimes also writing about mothers who are absent somehow, or human beings to the extent they're failing their children, and what the effect that has on the children. And I think that you don't have to see that when you're reading the book, but I think it's another layer, and it's definitely meant to be there. I often think in images, so I don't think I originally thought I'll use Jupiter because Jupiter has these moons, and they never get close to her, and it's like psychology in a way. It's like, the object and the mini object in a way. But those, as I read about Jupiter, I saw that, I saw both, that kind of Asimov, super scientist stuff, which is fun. But I also saw that, this cold planet, and the gravity, and different things about it that keep the moons apart is part of the story too. And so it evolved into a story of two sisters, and the mother who tried her best, but it never made the right decisions, and how that had such disastrous effects eventually. Yeah.
Well, I could talk for much longer, but I see that we have all of 2 minutes left in our hour. So I'm going to give this back to you, Casey.
All right, perfect. Always a good question. Where can we find your books?
The books are pretty easily available through Amazon, and through bookshop.org, which is sort of the anti-Amazon. And they can be ordered through bookstores because they're distributed by Ingram. And I think Smashwords, you can also get them if you don't have a Kindle and use some other device. So yeah, very easy to get, along with the other ones. The earlier Cassandra books and the Pam books are not available in general as print copies anymore, except on the secondhand market. But Open Road Media makes them all available as ebooks, and they often have sales going too. So a lot of people can encounter them that way. And they have a volume of all 4 earlier Cassandra books available for around $14. You can get that for less too, and they're having one of their early bird sales or something. So yes, I hope you will all see more Cassandra Riley, and look for the next one set in Bruges in a year, maybe, if I'm lucky.
Yeah, gotcha. And where can people find you? Where can people find you on, I don't know, social media, on your website? Where's the best place to reach your information? What's coming up next?
So I have a website just for the mysteries called Barbara Wilson Mysteries, easy to remember.com. And then for some of my other books, sort of all of the books, I have barbarashuholm.com. And so that's my name, for my legal name for writing lots of books about Scandinavia, if that interests you at all. To read about Scandinavia and also the Sami indigenous people. I've written quite a bit about that, as well as memoir, travel books, and so on.
Great, fantastic. Okay, well, it's in here on the West Coast, it's 12:01, so I'm gonna have to wrap this up and talk a little bit about what's coming up next month. But first, thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you so much, Karen, and everyone who joined us today. This has been a fantastic session, and I really appreciate it. And I hope you also join us for the September session, which is going to be on the 4th, Saturday the 4th, and we're going to be talking about an anthology. And the anthology is called Silk and Leather. So you can make your conclusions about what that might be about. So it's a little on the steamy side. And we're going to have the editor and 5 of the authors join us. So at Silk and Leather on September 4th. Hope you guys can make it. So again, thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Karen, and everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.